for the people on Facebook who love watching me step up to the... Wow, am I excited about this week's Finishing Well with Hans Scheil, our certified financial planner. Hans, today we're kind of unmasking home health care.
Well, yeah, and the whole issue of long-term care is a lot of folks that are investigating long-term care insurance, they're investigating it and they're kind of keeping an arm's length while they're doing this because it's very frightening to think about the fact that you may not be able to take care of yourself at some point.
Yeah, well, that idea of long-term care, I should have said that rather than home health care, but long-term care is a lot broader than I'd ever realized, really. It's not just me concerned about, what's going to happen to me when I turn 80 or get to the point where I can't take care of myself. It's like when I got cancer, all of a sudden I found out being the patient was easy. It was my family that had to bear the brunt of my disease.
Well, that's exactly right. And what we want to do on this show, in all the subjects, but specifically this one, is talk to the adult children that are really the people, that and the spouse, that end up bearing really the brunt of this problem. Okay, the person who's actually cared for, who's 80, 85, 90, I mean, we're in the United States of America. They're going to get their care. I mean, regardless of how well you've prepared for this, if you need to go to a nursing home, you're going to end up in a nursing home or an assisted living, or you need to get care at home. So the person that actually needs the care, they're going to receive it. The people that really have the stress with this are the spouse and the adult children, the families.
Yeah, and it was something I learned really backwards. When I got cancer, my wife found herself in this position of kind of losing her own identity. This whole idea of the caregiver, and, Peter Rosenberger and his show, Hope for the Caregivers. Same kind of thing where, oh my word, all this responsibility fell on her. And to think, it's kind of scary actually for me, Hans, to think that responsibility is going to fall on my children and that heartbreak of what I'm going to do with that.
Well, it is, and your spouse.
Right.
I mean, till death do us part means just that. And also honor your mother and father means just that. So who we're talking to here on this show is not only the person we're saying turning 65 and going on Medicare, and now we're planning our retirement and we're looking at our money and finances and Social Security, and we're trying to slip in a little preparation for long-term care. So you can look at this show and say, well, that show is for people right at retirement. Well, no, I mean, that's part of it. It's definitely for them, but it's also for the people who are 80 years old who perhaps haven't done some of this planning. There's things we can do for them now, 80, 85, 90 even. It's also for the people who are 30, 40, 50, 60 that have parents or in-laws that they're responsible for or going to be responsible for. And we want to take a look, and we want to impress upon them taking a look at how well prepared are you for this, or how prepared is mom or dad.
Yeah, it's kind of like this aha moment where, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Like, oh, that's going to find me in a lot of different predicaments that I really hadn't considered. And especially when it comes to caring for my own family well, my own children, and setting up for those particular responsibilities and getting some help.
Okay, so when it comes to mom or dad, I've found through my experience, people can much quicker deal with their own mortality. The fact we all know we're going to die at some point, and when we die, we know that we need to have some preparations made for our estate, so the things we have transfer to our children. And so I've been offering life insurance my whole career, and For the most part, people pretty much deal with that fact, and they just go along and talk about the insurance. What I'm telling you is people that need to be looking at this, they have much more trouble dealing with their own morbidity, or the fact that they may go through a period where they can't care for themselves and they are going to need some help. And that is more threatening to people than actually death is.
Yeah, and it's one of those aha things where when you stare into the face of this problem, all of a sudden you're realizing in humility, wow, I need help. And that's the beauty of this information that you're providing with your book, right?
Well, it is. And we do a lot in our practice with people, and they're in my books, both of them stories of real clients who are 40, 50, 60, somewhere in there, some of them in their late 60s, where their parents are just now confronting this, so they're confronting it. Their parents aren't able to take care of themselves. They may already be getting care. And now we're advising them. They become our client, and we're helping them do the preparations and make the financial, just to pay the bill at the place and to keep their bills paid and to file their tax returns and to make some decisions about their finances in light of the fact that we got this big bill to pay. And then we may have a healthy spouse that we have to provide for them as well during this. So you just, when this care comes on all of a sudden and it's not planned well, it's a big financial mess, and we help people through this, and they get through it, but it's very stressful. And so one of the messages that I want people to get, if I can get folks' attention on this show, not really teach them necessarily all the things, what I do in my work, but to just get your attention that, the best time to deal with this is now before a crisis happens.
And I think of my own grandparents, where my father had Alzheimer's. My grandfather had Alzheimer's. And at first, the plan was, right, my grandmother was going to take care of him. She was in her 70s at the time and extremely capable. It really almost killed her. Just being a caregiver, and all of a sudden her health was really compromised because they didn't have the options of, or they didn't think they had the options of getting somebody to do the heavy lifting.
We find this a lot, where we have one sick person, and 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later, we now have two sick people, because the caregiver and the stress of being a caregiver is hard for anybody. But when you get somebody in their 70s, they need to be taking care of themselves as well, and they reach a point, some of them, where somebody needs to be taking care of them, and they're the primary caregiver. And I don't know how big your grandfather was or how big or small your grandmother was, but just lifting, a man my size or your size, and when you're a 140-pound woman, is it's not possible.
Yeah, well, just managing the stress to a great extent. If he wasn't even able to chew his food at some point, it was traumatic for her, and I'm sure that had a lot to do, with her becoming ill as well. So, well, getting down into the nuts and bolts of that today, what would you recommend for people so they don't face that?
Yeah, it's just home health care. Whether they have a spouse or not, I'm going to recommend the same thing, if it's possible, to the daughter of somebody who doesn't even live with them, or if they do live with them, or they've moved into them with them. Home health care and these home health care agencies, they do the work, the work of the Lord, taking care of the sick, but they're also caring for the caregiver because they're giving them a break. So what was it that Peter Rosenberger said in his book? You said it better at lunch.
He calls it the Delta Doctrine, that, when you're in the airplane and the oxygen mask comes down, they say, you got to make sure that you have the oxygen mask on yourself so that you are alive to help your child get the oxygen mask on, so to speak.
Well, yeah. So you have somebody like your grandparents. And in those days, we really needed to send Grandpa to a nursing home. That's the only way we didn't really have home health care like we have it now. In today's day and time, Grandma would have been taking care of him as long as she could get away with it. And that's why the family needs to stick their nose in there and kind of see how mom's doing or grandma's doing, and how just kind of they need to get over there, and they do. And they spend some time and give some assistance to her and just kind of look at this whole movie. And you can bring in the home health care agencies in this area about $20, $21 an hour, $22 an hour. This isn't cheap. It's more than that for skilled care, but you can bring in people, and 3 or 4 hours a day can make a huge difference, where it's going to allow that caregiver to take a break. And during that time, they're going to do the heavy lifting stuff. And it doesn't make the problem go away, but it makes it workable.
You're listening to Finishing Well with certified financial planner Hans Schilder. Today we are talking or unmasking some things maybe you hadn't thought about when it comes to long-term care. Of course, all these resources are available in the complete Cardinal Guide to Planning and Living in Retirement, both the book itself and the accompanying workbook. You can find it at cardinalguide.com, where they have all these resources, even the chapter on long-term care. Hans, you can download it. There's a PDF right there.
Well, yeah, so the book has been real successful. It's on Amazon. I'd love for people to buy the book. But again, that's not the point. What I want people to get is the lessons that are in this book. And the real lesson that I would like you to get out of this show today is to learn a little bit about long-term care and home health care, but to also learn a little bit about how widespread the problem is, and what are some things that you can do now with your parents, with your in-laws, with your aunts and uncles, or if you're the aunt or uncle or parents, some things you can do with your children, because you're going to need your children. If you're 65 or 70 now and in good health or reasonably good health, and you're anticipating this problem in the future, when this actually happens, you're going to need your kids to be there for you.
So when we come back, believe me, we're going to sit down with Hans as he would sit down with the family, kids around the table, parents, and have that hard conversation as we are unmasking the idea of long-term care. All right. That's one segment.
Good. It goes by quick.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So I think in the second segment, what we want to zero in on here is just what I said so if you're in this situation now, one of the things, like if you're an adult child listening, or you're one of these people in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, and we got you thinking about your in-laws, you're thinking about your mother, thinking about your father, and then you're thinking about your brothers and sisters, it's usually going to be one of you that is going to be the go-to person for the parents. And then we've got to bring your brothers and sisters on board. And my sense is most families, they're in different places when it comes about this. And then we got to get the parents on board, and the parents are in different places with all their kids. I mean, parents have always been taught that they need to, love their children equally, or they have that in there and they want to balance things. But the reality is that, if you have to choose between your daughter or your two sons, it might well be your daughter is the person that you want to entrust the money to. And a lot of folks really don't like to be pinned down to make those decisions. And it might be your one son over the daughter and the other ones, and it really isn't over. These people aren't getting some kind of special bargain, but it just is. And so we need to talk about just that. We need to have some conversations, and just talking about that, you don't necessarily need to have them first before you call me in. So if you're the parent and we've got your attention and you want to do something about this, you want to get the book, you want to read the books, and you want to do something about this, then we can meet, and that's one of the first things that we're going to talk about is facilitating those conversations with your children or one of your children. We really don't want to meet with a spouse alone to talk about how we're going to work on the other spouse, but I've kind of met before with a daughter and
Right.
and her mother, and then we needed to talk about how we're going to get the father on board. So we don't want to get doing the show where we're not on here, but I think that what we need to do in the second section here is we just need to talk about, okay, so if we've got your attention, both groups of people, like, what do you do about that? Okay?
We got it.
Okay.
Welcome back to Finishing Well with Certified Financial Planner Hans Schild. The Cardinal Guide.com is the wonderful sponsors of this program. But, the heart and soul of this is really helping people finish well with what becomes a difficult situation at times when things come up that you may not have anticipated. And, I often think, Hans, that when I sold cars, a lot of people would come in thinking, the last thing I want to do is trust a car salesman with this important decision that they had. But, I did it every single day of my life, and I helped people through that process of, making it fit their budget and making it fit their needs and helping them make sure that, they could tow that boat too in a case. So such is the case when you're bringing your family into these very difficult situations, and you've had all this experience with all these families helping them finish well. And so how cool is it now that you can join with our listeners and give them a few tidbits on what happens in that family conversation when you're talking about this very difficult situation?
Well, sure. And when we draw the car salesman parallel, if you'd be more comfortable, we have an attorney on staff that we work with that you could start with her. And I find myself being just as much of a social worker as I am a financial planner. And it really is an estate planner, and I'm very well trained and highly trained in book smarts on estate planning. And, that really isn't that difficult. I mean, it's like, what's going to happen? I mean, sure, it has some book smarts to it. But what we're talking about today is that period of time before you pass away, which could be years, where you're not able to take care of yourself. And then we're talking about how much it costs, the different services that you can engage in or that you can hire to help you, how much they cost, and then how all of your other money is going to be protected and used and spent. So it's the period of time of your estate during a time of incapacity is what we're talking about. And so specifically what we'd like to do is get you to engage in some financial planning and maybe a little social work on the front end of that financial planning to have a family discussion or a one-on-one discussion throughout the family, or two-on-one if I'm participating in helping, or two-on-two, or whatever the case may be, to talk about, so what can you do to be proactive to prepare your family so that this crisis or this problem is...
Yeah, and every family is unique. This family's got 3 children, and one of them is like the most compassionate person. That's the one who's going to want to help with the care, but the other child is the one that's business smart, and so you're running interference with all this, trying to help this to be a team in this situation because you run into it all the time.
Well, you are, and then we really didn't talk about the prodigal in the arrangement where, the person that you don't want handling the money when you're incapacitated, and you don't even want them bickering amongst your other kids. And now I'm sitting here really talking to you and asking you to make decisions in this area of something you just really didn't want to deal with at this point in your life.
Yeah, but by dealing with it now, clearly, people aren't dealing with it without understanding at all what your wishes would have been.
Yeah, so what I'm talking about is, it sounds in the example you created, the daughter is going to be the healthcare power of attorney. And then the second person on the healthcare power of attorney, in case the daughter's incapacitated, is going to be that son with the business smarts. And then it's going to be the reverse on the durable power of attorney, where he's going to be number 1, and then she's going to be number 2 on that in case he's incapacitated. So, the first step in all this is to get legal documents so your kids can actually, who you've entrusted, it doesn't have to be your kids. You could hire somebody to do this. It could be a niece or a nephew. It could be, it's preferably somebody that's younger than you so that they're going to be.
Well, as an adult child, I can just tell you, it was not 2 weeks ago in my own life that we were in North Carolina. My mother-in-law was in Texas. She'd taken a bad fall, and we're calling to get information over the phone. And because we didn't have our good friend Hans help us out 5 years ago and get these discussions made, guess what we were able to do in North Carolina as far as even finding out what condition she was in.
Okay, so those are first two documents that we're going to need, but we're going to need to have some conversations before we get there. I mean, so it's not like we're just going to open with that. And you actually don't need Perry Mason drawing those up as an attorney. I mean, they're fairly simple documents to draw. There's some variables in them, but they're extremely valuable when and if this period of time. And, you know, some period of time with this happens to most people. There's a pretty good chance that son is going to be the executor on the estate as well, okay? And then we got mom or dad. So if we got a situation where, there's mom and dad are both around now, we don't maybe want to give this power to the kids yet, and we got mom or dad. So we could put, if we're dealing on moms, we could put dad down first, so the kids don't really have any power until dad's either gone on and passed on, or he's incapacitated as well, and then the reverse on theirs. So that's one of the first steps in preparing for this, is just to give people the legal power that they're going to need when they're caring for you.
All right, and here comes the million-dollar question that's coming out of my mother-in-law and my parents and everybody else is, you're not going to put me in a nursing home. You're not going to put me in a nursing home. But the good news is, by talking about these things ahead of a time, my mother-in-law doesn't need to worry about us putting her in a nursing home if we really had an honest discussion about, here's our options. There's home health care, there's assisted living. Can you speak to that a little bit, Hans?
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, if this person is saying, you're not going to put me in a nursing home, I'm going to view that as a good thing, because that means we're in a conversation. So now we're talking about what we've avoided talking about, okay?
We said we were unmasking, but that's what comes out, yeah.
Well, I've just heard it for years. And so then the next conclusion from that is, if I just don't talk about it and I don't prepare for it, I guess that means I'm never going to the nursing home, okay? And so the answer I think you were looking for is, there's such a thing as home health care these days, okay? And so I have relationships with home health care people really all over the country, and specifically here in North Carolina, in the Raleigh, Charlotte, Greensboro area up in the mountains. We have agencies that are serving our existing clients, and these people just work wonders. And so you bring in professional people, you stay at home, you're not going to a nursing home. You may go to a nursing home at the end of it. I mean, there may be a point where you get to the point where that's a better place for you, but there's a whole lot of time that you can be cared for at home, and a lot of people never go to the nursing home. They go to the hospital.
But the neat thing is, right, is there's now coverages for those very things. So, we have a plan, Mom or Grandma, to make sure that isn't necessary.
Yeah, if you look in my book, and specifically in the workbook, we've laid out all types of financial planning options. We don't mention the names of the companies. We don't give all the details. I don't want anybody trying to buy a policy out of this book. That's not where the intent, but it just lays out about 10 examples in the long-term care section of what you can do. Some of this is dependent upon your health. I mean, some of these plans, you got to be in very good health, which makes them not a very viable option for people 65, 70, 75. Some of them you just need acceptable health, or if you have some serious health conditions, you need to have shown a couple of years or a year where you're stable. And some of the plans don't have any health qualifications. So there's a solution for everybody depending upon your health, but you could get a hold of this workbook and you could get a general idea. And I don't even necessarily need to sell it to you. That's not, again, the purpose of the show. You can go to my website, cardinalguide.com, and you can go under the 7 Worries tab. You can hit on long-term care, and you can get a copy of that chapter of the book and the workbook. You can download it for free. In fact, you can construct the whole book if you wanted for free off of our website by downloading it.
Which is cardinalguide.com. I'll mention again. But, it's an interesting thing as I think about this. How many people, when they turn 60 and they've been keeping, term life insurance, go, oh, if I'd only bought some, whole life or universal life policy when I was in my 30s, if I'd only, well, it's the same kind of thing, right? When it comes to long-term care policies when you're in your 50s and 60s, am I right?
Well, yeah. I mean, we have options, first of all, to just take a portion of your IRA or your 401k and transfer it into an investment product like an annuity or a life insurance. You can't transfer an IRA into a life insurance policy, so into an annuity. And then you add some features to it, and you effectively, with a single premium, you buy some long-term care and some home health care coverage. That's a way oversimplification. We have a way to buy these with single premiums. We have short-term care policies. So I don't really want to get this to be an insurance pitch, on the radio here. If you go into my workbook and you take a look, it's just the workbook outlines, like I said, about 10 examples. It shows premium rates for a 55-year-old and a 70-year-old through all these examples. And it'll just give you a bit of an idea of what we're talking about. And you don't even need to give us your phone number. And you can rest assured that if you do call us, you're not going to get calls for months and months and months and months like I used to make when I was an early insurance salesperson. We run a whole different type of business. As you can get in touch with us and access resources, we don't really want to push anything on you. We're here. We provide the information and the counseling. And I've found that if we get talking about this and moving forward with looking at some insurance, getting some legal documents put together, we most always get in touch with one of your adult kids. So we're going to have this conversation as part of the process because we need to have them involved, because if you're collecting on one of these things, either I'm going to be dealing with them or one of the younger people in my agency they're going to be now older people, and they're going to be the ones, they're going to be needed talking to your kids. You're not going to necessarily be on top of this when you're 80, 85 years old, and using it.
So we're hoping as you listen to this show that you'd consider taking the mask off of it in your family. It's not a discussion that everybody's dying. Maybe that's a poor choice of words. But they're not just anxious to get into, what's going to happen if I need this type of care and all those kind of things. But wow, those who do it, save their families from that situation. I don't want to put that burden on my kids.
Well, yeah, and just taking care of the money isn't going to get rid of the whole problem, but it certainly removes a lot of the stress, because your kids are going to have enough to be worried about just with your care and your well-being and dealing with their brothers and sisters that aren't necessarily playing, or their cousins sticking their nose in the whole thing, and the neighbors. And there's just so much stress around a person needing care that if we can get the financial piece of this under management and planned for, and the legal piece, and to put your kids in a position of power, that, it just makes good business sense.
And you can finish well. So you've been listening to Finish Well with the certified financial planner, Hans Schild. Again, brought to you by CardinalGuide.com, where you can find all these resources, including the complete Cardinal Guide to Planning for and Living in Retirement. All there at CardinalGuide.com. Hans, it's a blast as always. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Okay, should we shut that off? I probably ought to learn how to do that. I could be that.
You can just push the done button, and then we'll reboot it.
Finish? Is that done?
Yeah.